What would it feel like to be free? Do you constantly try and make changes in your life but always slip back into old ways? I used to be constantly frustrated by my lack of willpower. What I never knew is that there was a reason why I could not control myself, and that there are processes that you can follow to regain your freedom. I interview some of the most knowledgeable and compassionate minds talking about breaking all varieties of bad habits and how to actually live a joyful and fulfilling life. Listen to the show and hit subscribe to free yourself from the shackles of the mind. And if you find some benefit, please share it with a friend and let's make the world a better place together. Hi, welcome to Break the Chain podcast. Today I'm here with Richie Hardcore. I'm very excited for this episode. Haven't recorded anything for about 6 months due to just getting so busy with uni and it's been a shame not to get any episodes out there, but I'm really excited for this one and it's taken a long time to get it lined up. So it's really nice to have you here today, Richie.
Yo, thanks for being interested in talking with me, James. Appreciate it, man.
So you're an educator, a public speaker, an advocate, a retired Muay Thai champion, and you work in family and sexual violence prevention, mental health and fitness, and you also spent 6 years working in drug harm prevention. So, you've done a lot. You're a busy guy. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, we'd be honoured if you'd share your story with us.
My professional work and my public advocacy falls out of the fact that, like many families, my childhood was colored by my father's struggles with his own mental health and alcoholism. And with that came some degree of family harm. And that really kind of obviously shaped me as a young person and shaped my interests and my passions as I moved into adulthood, and kind of underpins the work I've done and my academic education when I went back to university. And it's all sort of coalesced into what I do publicly now. I sort of bring my lived experience and my academic understandings and my professional work all together and work with people anywhere and everywhere around some interconnected topics, whether that's masculinity and looking at what that is and how we learn about like the dominant paradigms of masculinity, or domestic and sexual violence prevention, or alcohol and drug harm, or mental health, or how all these things work together, right? I think that, and then on top of all of that, I am a Muay Thai coach and kickboxing coach. I've been doing martial arts for 29 years. I started fighting when I was 13 years old and then retired from fighting at 33 and have been coaching other fighters since I was probably about 27 or 28. And I also work with lots of different kids who are in like alternative education. I do some pro bono work for an organization called the Grace Foundation, and work with like people who are coming out of prison or in alcohol and drug rehabilitation themselves, and use Thai boxing and everything that goes with that as, part and parcel of people's rehabilitative processes.
That's really interesting. I'll be super interested to go more into that, especially, addictions really. What I do, it's totally what I'm focused on trying to help people with as a recovering drug addict myself. And one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is because you deal with masculinity. What does healthy masculinity look like? One of the things I've had to do as part of my student placement is we do gendered groups, and one of the things that we do is we'll sit with a group of men and talk about masculinity. And I cannot believe how I find this really difficult, because quite a lot of these guys there'll be a lot of tough guys in there. Some of them have come straight out of prison, some of the same guys you're dealing with. And I find, sometimes I feel like I'm not the right guy to be doing that. I related to your story because I felt I was a pretty insecure kid as well. I never felt, trying to be tough was something that seemed really important when I was a kid, and I had a go at that, and it just wasn't me. It just wasn't, it backfired on me big time when I tried violence as a way of life. It didn't work. It didn't work for me. Like it did seem to, it seemed to have.
Well, when you say violence is a way of life, what are you doing? Are you trying to stand over people?
I think it started when, walking home from primary school, and there was this one specific kid that used to bully the hell out of me, and it would be like the walk home from school every day. I'd walk home, and I was a real sensitive kid, and I just wanted to be friends with everyone. And this guy specifically would walk home, and he would just push me against the wall, punch me, and just terrorize me, and it would just be every day. And it was the transition between that and secondary school, and I just figured, like, if I want this to stop happening, I'm going to have to do this first. I'm going to have to be the guy that does that, so that doesn't happen to me first. And then for around 3 years, it was just like being a fucking knob. Basically, there's no other way I can put it, but just terrorizing people, just trying to be hard, basically. But it was actually, it was an illusion, because I'm not tough. I don't have that toughness. I don't like getting punched in the face. I don't enjoy that. There's no joy in that for me whatsoever. Like it's a really adverse experience for me, getting punched in the face. Don't like it. But yeah, I just tried to be the tough guy, and that pretty much just ended up with, there's always someone tougher. And when you're trying to be a bully, people don't like bullies, and it'd end up with like around, at times 8 people stamping on my head or hitting me with, there was one specific time where 8 people who were about 6 years older than me. When you're 14, that's a big deal because they're so much stronger, right? And then they're just getting my head stamped in and hitting me with a baseball bat, and just like, thankfully I watched My Name Is Earl. That show changed my life, and the idea of
I haven't seen that.
It basically is. I'll give you a quick rundown from my memory. As a guy, and he just goes around doing loads of bad stuff all the time. He's just not a good guy, and he wins the lottery. And straight after he has the ticket, he runs into the road like, yeah, and he gets hit by a car, and he loses the ticket. And he learns about karma. The idea that if you do something bad will happen to you. If you do something good things will happen to you. And I think I watched that maybe when I was about 14 or 16, and it was just a comedy show basically, but I really took that on board, and I realized that for every time I was doing something, especially because when you hit someone, it's a really symbolic event. It's a big thing. It's a terrible thing to do. You're actually purposely hurting someone. And I would notice that every time I do this, it would come back. Every time it would come back, and it wouldn't be like linked up. Sometimes it would just be like, sometimes randomly in the street, someone would just walk up to me and just punch me in the face, didn't know who they were, and they would almost have no reason. It was amazing, and it really showed me that there was just like, cause and effect. Every action has an equal and opposing reaction, and then I pretty much just stopped doing that. And since then, oh my God, I've had to make so many apologies to so many people for my behaviour in those 3 years up till about the age of 14. So yeah, that's basically.
Oh, well, at least you reached out and made this apology. So it's cool.
I'm sure there's more. Yeah, I'm really ashamed of that behaviour. It's just it was never a part of me. It was just it was an adaptive behaviour to try and.
I think it's. Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of men in particular, flex and posture and pose about being tough as a way of protecting themselves, right? Like, as you say, it's an adaptive behavior. It's trying to protect yourself from not just physical harm, but emotional harm, right? By putting on this facade of toughness. And a lot of us do that, right? And we do it in different ways. doesn't always have to be physical violence. It can be how we look, or the car we drive, or, covering yourself in tattoos, or in the corporate world, it can be being like a, aggressive business person and making heaps of money and working long hours, all these sorts of social signifiers of strength and power and dominance over others is kind of what a lot of boys and men are acculturated to, right?
And that's another interesting thing, isn't it? It's masculinity in general. And what do you think that what expectations are society placing on men?
Yeah, well, obviously every society has some degree of difference, but I think broadly, at least across the Western world, when you think about the traditional expectations and associations of masculinity, it's to be emotionally stoic and repress your emotions, unless, of course, they're like happiness or anger. There's not a lot of room for like the grey and in between. We expect like a strong focus on anti-femininity, really, right? Don't be gay, don't be soft, don't be hard. Don't be hard. Don't cry. Pursue status, pursue wealth, have power over women. All these sorts of things sort of come through a lot of the stories we hear from, primary school. The music we listen to, the movies we watch, the advertising that is selling us beer through like muscular sports stars and like particular poses, you know what I mean? Like there's this strong cultural driver that this is how you're meant to show up in the world as a man, right? You never see like a poet or a scientist or a stay-at-home dad with a brand endorsement. Do you know what I mean? It's always men who are good at physical pursuits. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there are, if you talk to an evolutionary psychologist or an evolutionary biologist, they'll tell you that there are some degree of biological differences in behavior, on average between men and women. And obviously there's, outliers, but, we can have different interests and different behaviors based on our sex. But the sociological side of things, I think, is where the work lies, in that if we allow boys and men socially to be emotionally expressive, to not have to be tough all the time, to be emotionally vulnerable, to be nurturing, to be respectful to a woman, and get praise for that instead of the reverse, I think it'll go a long way in making society better for everyone.
I find it...
if you think about your work around alcohol and addictions, a lot of men are struggling with, a difficult internal landscape, and alcohol and drugs are an easy way to turn the noise down. If we could allow boys and men to be emotionally expressive and ask for help and be vulnerable, then that sort of self-destructive nihilism or escapism perhaps wouldn't be as prevalent.
Nihilism, yeah. It's a big problem, and it's definitely something that I attribute to being a product of society as well. It's really interesting because we live in a world of memes, and it'll either push one message or it'll be like a complete polarity of that message, and it's like, be like this. It's like, oh no, be like this, and it will kind of rock from one side to the other. And society, and I think there's been really practical reasons for why maybe men have been taught to be tough and get on with it and protect and do those things, because I think it's probably quite detached from history and the fact that for all of history practically civilization has had to defend itself from enemies, really practically over and over again. So civilizations or societies would need people to be really, really strong, so that they, if you can be attacked at any moment, you have to be prepared to lay down your life, essentially. So there's a really practical benefit to that. Also, in a society of service, and especially selfless service, which all spiritual cultures of the world are based kind of on selfless service, so not kind of complaining about things and making things about yourself. So then there's that piece, and then there's the meme of which it's certainly not a bad thing, of be vulnerable. If you're having a bad time and you're mentally unwell, talk to somebody about it, and that's fantastic. And I think that because it can be so polarized, and it's like, no, it's got to be like this or it has to be like that all of the time, there's no in the middle. And I think these things really apply to time and place. There's a time to be really strong and to get on with it, and then there's a time to open up and to be vulnerable to people. And I think if we're telling people to be vulnerable to people, you have to really trust someone to open up to them, right? You can't just go out and be doing that to anyone, because if you go and open yourself up to the wrong person, they can hurt you. This is why I think you've got to be, have good friends. And if you don't have good friends, find good friends, or to go to see a counsellor or something like that. But there's, it's not so simple, is it? And I do feel like it either goes one way or the other a lot.
You mean it goes one or the other in the public discourse?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's important to have that nuance, right? Like, yeah, it is important to have the ability to be emotionally vulnerable, but as you say, James, it's got to be at the right time and the right place. You can't just be like a walking open wound who is incapable of dealing with the inevitable hardships and suffering of the human experience, right? Because then you fall apart all the time. And life is hard and life is difficult, and some degree of difficulty and challenge is actually good for us, and it helps us to grow and flourish and learn new skills. But at the same time, if the only way we know how to deal with that stuff is through a limited range of responses and behaviors, then that can inevitably be really detrimental for us and the people around us.
I totally agree, and I think that comes back down to the messages that society that we're being given, which is, because the one of the overriding philosophical underpinnings of society now is it's not selfless service, it's hedonism, it's that eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die kind of thing. It's like just try and feel as good as possible, try and have as good a time as possible, and conveniently companies are telling us what products and experiences are going to make us feel good, and then they're amplifying that on giant billboards and the TV and on phones and Facebook feeds, and we're just stuck in this giant feedback loop of you should feel good all of the time, and this is how you should do it. And everybody's on that bandwagon, and Facebook is reinforcing it, and Instagram by this is my life and I'm having the best time, I'm living my best life. And people are, because if you try to feel good all of the time, I would just relate that's an addiction. You're trying to ride the wave. You're in the barrel. You're just going for it. You don't want to paddle. You don't want to wait for the right day. You don't want to, there's just no circumstances. You just want to be riding that wave constantly. And that's, that, as an addict, that was literally what I was doing. And I just really worry that society is breeding addicts, like happiness addicts. And, I don't know if have you ever seen the documentary Century of the Self?
I have not, no.
It's mind-boggling. They talk about how in the 1920s, after they went through two major depressions and financial crises, and the whole economy nearly collapsed. And it also tied in with after World War II, they'd learned how to mass produce things. It's just like mega, and they had all these factories and production lines set up, and they said, we can make all this stuff, and we need to just be able to just sell and sell and sell stuff. So we need to turn people into change people from a needs-based society into a wants-based society. So they
wants-based,
desires-based. So it's not about need; it's about what you want. So they have to train people to want things that didn't need.
Yeah. The whole concept of like it's manufacturing desire. That's what like the advertising industry is built on, right?
Well, yeah, it's at the time they were really conscious that what they were doing is that they said that what we need to do is we need to train people to be greedy and envy. And what someone said at the time, I think it was E.F. Schumacher wrote in his book Small is Beautiful. He's one of the leading economists at the time, but he was also a real deep thinker, and he was quite a spiritual chap. And he said that, you know, if you're literally, it's like opening Pandora's box, because these two things, envy and greed, have been things that across the world people have repressed on purpose, because they're saying, like, if you let this one out of the bag, it's going to be really bad. And the guy one of the economists, Lord Keynes, who proposed this whole idea, he said that if, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's bad, we need to fix the economy, then when people have money, they'll be happy, and we'll sort it out later. It's 100 years on from then, and people are, you know, because we've been trained to be greedy and envious, and we just want more all the time. And obviously, when you have money, you just want more. Because you know, I think I've heard you say that up to about $70,000, you do actually get happier. But once you get to that point, once you get to that point, you never actually get what you want. You never actually feel satisfied from money. So
yeah, totally, money's necessary, but it's not like, money's definitely helpful. And the lack of it, and the lack of being able to meet your material needs, is a driver of substance abuse, poor mental health, stress, all these sorts of things. But the pursuit of wealth in and of itself doesn't, it's been shown, make us exponentially happier over a certain amount every year. I forget exactly what the figure is, but yeah, there's plenty of like sociologists and sort of socially minded economists who have done work around that sort of stuff. And yet, yeah, as you say, James, it's been taught to us that like work, consume a whole bunch of stuff you don't need. And that's often at the expense of our psychological well-being, being connected with our families, you know, being connected with ourselves, being connected with the planet and the environment around us. And so we kind of have this inner void, I suppose, or this inner lack of contentment that we're constantly trying to deal with through more consumption. But that's not the answer, I suggest.
Yeah, I feel really grateful, because I've been seriously mentally unwell in my life up until, you know, maybe about 4 years ago, and I was really fortunate to stumble across a spiritual path which laid some things out to me that made it like blatantly clear that, you know, consumption of external things doesn't even have the capacity to make you happy. And my unhappiness was due to my state of consciousness. And even through CBT, they look at it, you know, like in the same way. It's like the way what you think, what you want, the way you see yourself, the way you see others, are all going to determine how happy you are, especially if you're constantly thinking about wanting something that you don't have. And one of the other things that they pointed out to me that was how fascinating anxiety was from a spiritual perspective. That if you're anxious at all stages of possession, you will still be anxious. Like if you don't have what you want, you'll be anxious because you don't have what you want. If you get what you want, you'll be anxious that you might lose what you have, and then if you lose it again, you'll be anxious that you lost what you had. So if you base your life around, you know, strongly wanting things, and then things being the thing that are going to solve your problem of happiness, you're always going to have this anxiety that goes along with that desire. And that really blew my mind, and it stopped the chase for me. It totally stopped me just going after things trying to use it as a source of happiness, and once I knew that, because I'd always lived such a selfish life as a addict, as someone who was just consuming things all the time. So I stopped trying to consume and started trying to give back instead, which I think you certainly live a life that's in the same vein as that. And how did you come about, how did you end up doing what you do?
It wasn't with any degree of set, game plan. I never wrote like a 5-year plan and this is what I'm going to do. It all really just evolved kind of organically, I suppose. I do so many different things. Do you have one particular you wanted to ask about, or?
I think that one of the things that I was really interested in doing this episode around is about I think that men are particularly confused right now, and what the purpose is of being a man at the moment is not so clear cut. What is toxic masculinity, and what does healthy masculinity look like? Because I know that's one of the areas that you're really passionate about and you speak about quite regularly.
Yeah, cool. So I got into trying to understand gender roles and the whole concept around gender through work in domestic violence prevention and sexual violence prevention, maybe about 10 years ago. And then I used to talk about what is consent and what is coercive control, and doing sort of the work over the years, coming back to sort of like what are root causes across all of this stuff. These limited ideas about masculinity, the traditional associations expected to, from boys and men. And a lot of those things are about having power over a woman, being a playboy, being dominant over others, using violence, having a disdain for homosexuality, pursuing status, a primacy of work. All these thoughts of expectations are often socially taught and socially reinforced, right? So if you think about times in your own life when maybe you got teased for being different, or you got hassled for liking the wrong toy, or maybe you cried once and someone told you to stop crying and harden up, or you wore the wrong color t-shirt, or you didn't laugh at the right joke, or you're still a virgin, or you don't like drinking alcohol, and what is this social expectation around you, and how does that play out? And for me, as a teenager who didn't want to drink alcohol because of alcoholism in my family, I was definitely like teased and hassled and peer pressured all the time for not buying into this thing, which is meant to be like a masculine rite of passage, right? And conversely, like I got good at fighting as a sport, and I got like social props for that. I got, I'm just going to fix the lighting here a bit, but I got sort of social validation and reward because I was good at, combat sports, right? And I kind of leaned into that in hindsight. In high school, I was really into like grunge and alternative. I was like hung out with the emo punk kids, and would wear, our hair in like pink colors, and would wear kilts and, studs, like the whole sort of Sex Pistols look. This is going back a long time. And we went to like an all boys rugby school that was working class, and we were like always teased and hassled and put down, and that's based around these constructions of what masculinity are, which I continue to be good at sports, look a certain way, all the stuff I've been talking about. And so when I kind of got into a fist fight at school one day and I did well and I got like social capital from that, subconsciously I leaned into that. I cut off my hair, took out my nose ring, started wearing baggy jeans and basketball singlets, and sort of leaned into this what socially valorized idea of, I guess, masculine performance, right? And everyone treated me better, teachers, girls, like other boys. And I think what we need to understand though is no matter how sort of like tough you look or cool you look, or how you perform your masculinity, because a lot of masculinity is, public performance, doesn't protect you from depression or heartbreak or grief. And if all you've got is money, cars, braggadocio about, your sexual conquests, the ability to hurt other people with your fists and feet, then it's a really limited tool set, right? And you need to have like a broader one. And so when we talk about toxic masculinity, which is a term I don't think is very useful and actually does a bad job of bringing boys and men into conversations around change, we're talking about that stuff, that limited skill set, right? Because it's a box that's often socially reinforced, that's not good for us, it's unhealthy for us, hence the term toxic. But I think it's much more useful to talk about stereotypical masculinity or the expectations of masculinity or mainstream masculinity, because then it brings boys and men who aren't having these conversations already into the chat, right? So I've gone on like a kind of explicit journey to kind of figure that out. I actually just finished a master's degree looking at masculinity, to give my professional work like a deeper academic underpinning. And that was like an interesting journey to kind of like explore it more and understand that there are different ways that masculinity can look. We just have this one that's not necessarily particularly healthy right now as what they call hegemonic norm across I would say across much of Western culture.
Yeah, definitely. And congratulations on finishing your degree. And I'm envious of your position, because I still have a year and a bit to go. I never anticipated how broke I would be.
I finished my bachelor's degree like in 2009, I think, or 2010, and then I finished my honors degree in 2011. Then it was like 9 more years till I'd go and do like more postgrad. So I was quite out of practice from long form writing and thinking and citations, and it took a while to get going, and then COVID happened as well. So it was a bit of a long road to get it done, but I'm glad that it's done. Thank you.
I've swore I won't do another degree after this. I've swore I'll never do it to myself again.
Well, there's a lot of work.
How do you think that we can change the culture amongst men? How can we steer it in a more healthy direction?
I think just conversations like this, bro.
Yeah.
Just like regular dudes having regular conversations is the best way to go, Like, I get frustrated with a lot of like the sort of like online super woke social justice crowd, because it talks at people and about people and not with people, and it doesn't do a lot to like build bridges and meet people where they are. I mean, you work with addicts, right, or people suffering from substance abuse issues, and have you ever gone into a meeting or gone into the NA or AA rooms and used shame as an effective tool of behaviour change? Right? Like,
certainly not.
Just make
the
people
opposite.
shut down and treat what they already know.
Empathy.
The opposite. You make someone feel bad, they're going to go back to what they already know. Yeah.
Empathy and not judging for someone, even if they've done the most horrendous things.
Heinous shit. Yeah, that's it, bro. And you have to, I think, apply that concept or that belief system to really deeply embedded behavioural norms or cultural norms around masculinity. If we want boys and men to be emotionally expressive, to not denigrate women, to be accepting of like the kid who's gay at school and not a bully who's homophobic, if you want boys to understand that art and poetry and creativity are just as important and to be valued as sport and hard work, you need to have a lot of long-form, patient conversations in relatable language, right? Like, just jumping online and screaming at people about their toxicity is not the way forwards. You need lots of different voices with a diverse, cultural makeup and a diverse ideological makeup. Can't just be like left-wing people. You need right-wing people. You need like conservatives, and you need liberals saying aligned, parallel things about, masculinity is not working for us. We've got terrible domestic violence rates. We've got terrible suicide rates. Our prisons are full of men with addiction issues who have undiagnosed mental health issues, who were offending, and constructs around masculinity are a contributing factor to all of that. You need to have those sorts of conversations in relatable ways and continue to spread the chat and give each other permission to know it's okay to not be okay, it's okay to be vulnerable. You need to play an active, loving role in your children's lives. When you're having inevitable arguments in your relationships, screaming and calling names and using violence and intimidation is not acceptable, but change is possible if that's all you know, because that's all that's been role modeled to you from your own father, or the four men who were your stepdad before. You need to have those chats again and again and again and again, and that's how culture happens. You need relatable guys in positions of influence to role model this behavior, not just online, but more essentially offline. You need dudes in the corporate environment, you need dudes in the gym, you need dudes in academia, you need dudes in prison, you need dudes who are police officers to talk about all of the stuff that I'm talking about with you now, James, and help other men know that it's all right to be hard on the sports field but soft at home, And it takes time and it takes effort, but change is possible. We just need to keep on keeping on. I mean, the fact that you, who you're a bit younger than me, I presume, even asked me that question, and we're having this conversation right now, and people who listen to your podcast might take away one or two things. That's the change happening right there, man.
Definitely, because it's not normal. I don't know about you, but I know that I'm in a feedback loop of good stuff, and it's easy for me to, in a sense, think that the world's changing, but then I look at what's on TV, and that being a reflection of people's consciousness, and that's what's popular, and I'm just like, it's really not. The general message still is the same old shit, and there is a
dude, there's a TV show called Fuckboy Island. There's a TV show called Fuckboy Island. That is on TV NZ. Good. If you think that's so not harmful, but if we're having conversations around, I take that back. I hate the misuse of the word harm. Getting punched in the face is harmful, but if you don't think it's a perpetuation of culturally normative ideas around what it means to be a man, and then things will never change, right? Sure, you can laugh at a show like Fuckboy Island, but you need to consider that if you're talking about healthy relationships, I don't know if that's the role modeling that we want people to have.
Something else has come up, and there's something that I'll go back to it. I'll touch on this now because it's something that I think is important. That's again, I'm shaming myself because I've been shameful. One of the things that's just so terrible about this is the objectification of people, and shows like that are just really promoting that people are objects to be exploited, especially porn does it. That's probably in my opinion, the worst thing about porn is that it trains you to not see someone as a person. It's here is someone for you for your pleasure, and as men, the way I grew up, and you mentioned it earlier. It's losing your virginity is something that's a cool thing to do, and to sleep with loads of girls and stuff like that. And I had a really bad spree of that, especially when especially around that age of being a teenager and stuff. My God, I hurt so many people. And that was really seen to be a good thing, and that was the messaging that I was getting, and I really wish that had been different. And I think that it's worse now than it was then, because porn was, I had to bin dive to find porno mags at the supermarket, go in the big newspaper bin, and we'd be in there with head torches. It was hard to find porn, and now it's just like, I spoke to our mutual friend Joe Robertson about this as well, and it's just actually learning about it and how devastating. And I had to stop watching porn because it really did something really bad to me. It made me deeply unhappy, and it ruined my relationships for sure, as well as having too many relationships at a young age, and sexual activity at a really young age, and I think that there was a really deep wisdom in the religious teachings and the spiritual teachings of, like, you really want to hold off on that one, and just wait a bit. I can't imagine what it's like to have only ever had one sexual partner now, and that being your wife. I think that would be fantastic, because my mind's just all over the place, and it's because it's been trained.
Do you really?
It's been trained from a young age to do that. Sorry, what did you say?
Do you really think that? That's interesting. I've not considered that, because like you, I've been very promiscuous throughout my life. And I do regret some of that, because it came from a place of insecurity and I guess mutual traumatic trying to like, you can use sex like you can use drugs, right? Like it's an affect numbing tool, and you feel attracted and you feel cool, and you're not like feeling your pain or your depression or your anxiety or whatever, right? You're just hooking up with a hot person, but you need to always to do that again and again and again to keep avoiding those feelings, so it can become like unhealthy. But at the same time, I've had lots of like really, really lovely casual relationships with people that I continue to be friends with to this day. And I'm in a long-term serious relationship with my fiance. But yeah, I think you're right in that, like, the pursuit of sex, that's, I guess it's like, what's the intention of this? I think is important to consider. I think if you're just out there on Tinder, like, trying to like hook up with girls for your own sexual gratification, and you're really callous about it, then that is actually causing emotional harm to another person. I was talking to a female friend of mine the other day, and she said she'd been talking with this guy, they've been on a few dates, they end up having sex, and then he like blocked her on all social media and never called her or texted her ever again. That's being a fucking asshole. That's being a fuckboy.
So hurtful.
Right? And that's super hurtful, right? But at the same time, like, I don't want to say sex outside of marriage at any cost is bad. I personally don't agree with that. I think you can have, and this is where it comes down to, right? I think it requires self-knowledge, and it requires the ability to communicate, and if two people have that, then you can have a relationship that it might be undefined, right? What are we doing? Maybe we're just sleeping with each other and hanging out, and it's cool and it's casual and everyone knows who they are. But I will say, to be fair, that in my own experience, whenever that's happened, one or the other of us has tended to develop some degree of emotional connection that the other person might not reciprocate. Because I think in this modern time, we tend to forget that there is like an emotional and even spiritual component to sex, and that we forget that at our own detriment. And I'm not, I've got a whole bunch of Buddhas around my neck, and I pay some degree of homage and respect to spiritual teachings, but I'm not like a religious person. But I do think that, I don't know, what am I trying to say here? I think that for all I've said about it's cool to have casual relationships if they're well communicated and well intentioned, I do think perhaps that there is a deepening of the human experience when sex happens within not even a committed relationship, but at least where you have like some affection for each other,
I see that as, there's
otherwise, like you say, it's kind of like porn makes everything. Porn and a continuum. Like porn and apps and hookups and stuff do make everything like quite transactional, you know?
Yeah, I definitely see it as a, I never ever imagined that I would have my current perspective on it from how I grew up, and and it really came down to the philosophical underpinnings of what I was trying to do as well. And it was sort of like I thought that having sex with loads of people would make me cooler. That was probably true when I was 16 or 15 or whatever. Yeah. That actually probably was true. But then it was like ultimately everybody wants to love and to be loved. That's a fact. We can't get away from that. And everybody wants to be happy. And was it delivering the goods? And the reality was, for me, it was really like no. And now that I want to be in a committed relationship, and I certainly want to be happy and peaceful. And I just think that if I hadn't have been so promiscuous, my mind might be 1,000 times more settled now, and I'd have a chance of treating my current partner better for the rest of my life, and being able to actually be committed, so that the relationship can be something that's more purposeful, and we can achieve something together long term. And I just see how all these previous things have an effect on this now. And it's not to say that I didn't have a lot of fun doing those things, like I had a lot of fun doing drugs as well, but it didn't make me happy. And I really had to take all those things. I really had to take all those things into account.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's like in casual sex. There is, like you say, there's
it's an interesting one, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of suffering in casual sex, like you say, because usually, when you hook up, or usually one person ends up getting attached.
I think people mistake pleasure for happiness, and those things are really different, right?
Oh yeah.
Like we're always chasing like dopamine, serotonin, and we want to like keep speed, we want to do drugs and all this sort of stuff. Then that's the pursuit of pleasure, and often that is that hedonism that you were talking about earlier today. But if it's, I guess I think a lot of our actions, it depends on where they come from, right? Are they coming from a place of self-knowledge? Are they coming from a place of, like, deeper understanding? And are they intentional or are they reactive, right? Because for me, if I'm, I definitely think some of my dating and sleeping around and stuff like that came from a place of unawareness. I was unaware that I actually found it easier to be in a casual relationship than I knew how to sit with myself. And in hindsight, I wish I'd just known how to sit with myself, and it would have saved drama. Maybe I wouldn't hurt someone else's feelings. Maybe I wouldn't have my own feelings hurt. But it's not all like that. I guess I'm talking about the nuance of it all,
I think a lot of, one of the big shifts for me was learning how to respect people and be kind and be nice and be thoughtful, and not placing my pleasure on the highest pedestal, making my pleasure not necessarily the most important thing in the world, to be able to make some sacrifices for the good of other people, to be able to treat people properly. I never knew how to do that. I never even thought about that. I was such a little selfish, narcissistic person as a teenager, for sure. Yeah, I had to. Things
you
were
sound pretty harsh on yourself, Chip.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm all right with that. I'm happy.
I would say I would encourage you. Okay, I'm glad you're happy. I don't know you, man, but I would just encourage you to be a bit more forgiving of yourself. I totally get it. I've spent many hours from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. awake and obsessing about my mistakes, particularly when I was depressed for quite a few years and going through a bunch of grief and dealing with a whole bunch of unresolved issues. But I do hope that just talking to you now, there have been several occasions where you've really kind of fucking flagellated yourself, and I hope that you don't do that forever, because you don't know what you don't know, man. If you're a teenager and you're making mistakes, and it is part of the process, and it does suck that sometimes we might hurt other people's feelings, but at the same time, if you take accountability for that with yourself, if you've reached out across time and space, and maybe, hey, yo, when we dated, I was a bit thoughtless. I'm sorry. That's all you can do. And you know, using your platform like you're doing now to talk about that means that maybe other people will do it differently when their time comes, man. So give yourself a break. I mean,
I agree to a large extent, and it's not these things aren't something that trouble me anymore. But I think that there's so much value in talking about them. There are things that bother me now, because there's things that, you know, I know that behaviour, I've changed that, and there's behaviours that I have now that I'm not happy about, that I want to change, and those things, they do bother me. But all that stuff is stuff that, you know, I've really, to a large degree, dealt with all of that stuff, and it's just kind of like in the past now. And like I say, making amends for things, actually saying sorry and seeking forgiveness to things is unbelievably powerful. It's, you know, it's something that it really helped with all of that stuff.
People aren't always going to forgive you. People aren't always going to forgive us. Like, you know, I've definitely hurt people's feelings. You know, I had an affair once a long time ago that I always carry some degree of guilt from. But, like, I've genuinely tried to apologize and take ownership for my behavior and, you know, acknowledge the emotional upset that I caused through my behavior. But you can't keep re-prosecuting yourself for an ever, because then we never really move. And, you know, you talk about you're in a relationship now. I don't know, man. Like, if we're always stuck in the past with the mistakes we made, how do we ever be present, you know? It's like, take the learning, process it, hold on to it, be here now.
I think that you know, my heart goes out to everybody who does struggle with things like this, and they ruminate, and they are really feeling guilt and shame. Yeah. They feel guilt and shame, and they're stuck in their head, and their mind tortures them, because, you know, that's why we're doing this, is because I know that there's so many people out there who are like that. I think that one of the ways that I managed to get past that is I don't spend all my time stuck in that, because I know that that's all I'm thinking about myself, and that's all about me, even if it's me doing good or bad things. And I really try and devote my life to doing something higher and something more purposeful, and I can, you know, actually make a difference to these things that I've done wrong. One of the things that troubled me is when I've sold a lot of drugs, and I know how much harm that's done. So I made the commitment. I was like, I've destroyed the community, and now I'm going to fix it. I'm going to try and give back, so that I'm undoing some of that damage that I've done, and that satiates my conscience to a large degree. And, you know, one of the biggest things I did, you know, I've obviously asked people for forgiveness for things, but one of the biggest things that I do that contributes to my happiness, I'm sure, as well, and it's not why I do it, but it does, is that I forgive people. You know, because that makes me, you know, like, you know, I know how much of a prick I've been, and people have forgiven me. So I just make sure that I try not to hold resent towards anyone, because, you know, I don't know what paths people have walked and what people have been through. So just really trying, and that's not always easy. But yeah, that's definitely been a contributing factor to having a peaceful life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I still work on that. There are people that I would quite like to truly forgive, and I haven't quite gotten there yet, because, you know, people have wronged me and been, you know, quite awful at particular different stages of my life. But I think I'm getting there. But yeah, you're right. That's a really good point, man.
One thing, we've got a few minutes left. I know that you've suffered with mental health a lot in your life, and at times you've even been suicidal, and I was wondering if you would mind talking to that and how you got through that.
Yeah, right. So, you know, mental illness runs through my family history back to my great-grandparents, and there is like an epigenetic transmission of that through the observed behaviors that I grew up with, I suppose, and the environments I grew up in. And then when I was going through like divorce and a whole range of other sort of big life changes in my 30s, I got depressed, and which is for many people a particularly normal sort of experience, but I didn't understand that at the time. And yeah, all the stuff that came with that, a lot of suicidal ideation and a lot of missed work and a lot of eating too much ice cream late at night and a lot of insomnia and just being joyless and not doing my normal routine, put on a little bit of, I was never like a big boy, but, I wasn't like fit like I normally am, and just kind of like fell into this deep rut of rumination, like the word that you used earlier. And it wasn't until a manager at work once in my old job, and this is going back years and years, said, "Hey, do you suffer from depression?" And I had this limited idea of depression as something you're like born with and you had all the time or not. And often it's actually situational, and we ebb and flow, and we're not always going to be depressed or be. I think people mistake like depression as like something that's part of their identity. And yeah, some people do have like chronic mental illness, but for many of us, like mood-based disorders are something that we experience, but then can move on and through it and never have again. And I said, yeah, I don't have depression. And then I started crying in like fucking middle of work. And then I was like, maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started going to see a psychologist and unpacking my, my childhood, which was pretty traumatic by any sort of diagnostic metric, and putting myself back together better. And it wasn't like a linear process, I've been really fortunate to love and be loved by some amazing partners over the years, but I fell into a relationship that wasn't very healthy, and that led to my depression that I was recovering from, to like really go even lower than I was, and I was put on medication and stuff, but I found that the medication over time didn't work, and so I kind of went back to, with some degree of support from my psychologist and my community, my friends, to just a lifestyle that was conducive to healing. I kind of stopped taking Xanax, and I enrolled in my first marathon actually, and I made sure that I always had something to look forward to and goals, and I took long social media breaks. I delete all the apps and started training hard again like I did when I was a fighter, and just really kind of put lots of structure back into my life that had served me well when I was younger, before I'd been depressed, and put that stuff back in. But I'd done a lot of internal work, right, like with psychotherapists, and then I did some holotropic breathing with my bro Lucas Mack, and just kind of work through a lot of that somatically stored trauma. And it's just been a whole bunch of stuff. And like you, James, like my own work helping other people, and I get to reach thousands of people every year with like not just my story, but with the knowledge that I have professionally and academically, makes me feel good. Like a life that's purposeful is good for our mental well-being. On top of that, I was really lucky to meet Claire, who's my girlfriend and now my fiance, and she's really patient, and she's really self-aware, and she's on her own journey, and she let me heal in relation and in love, and it's been really fortunate, and it's been a slow process. And I think I can be prone to moroseness and melancholy. I think it's part of just how I am, but I've not been depressed. I got quite depressed in 2020 when I went through a bunch of really difficult stuff in my personal life. But having had that previous experience, I had like a scaffolding to hold on to, I did get pretty bad mentally in 2020. But I got through it again, and it just really kind of showed me that the process works if you just hang on to get through,
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Hey, I've really got to. Oh, you're welcome, man. Like, I think that's how you said how has this changed? It's just being honest, Like, there might be someone who watches this just like, oh fuck this guy, what a fucking dickhead, blah blah blah. But like, yo, man, that's on you, man. I'm just telling my story, and my story is, I know for a fact, supported by like empirical data and scientific research. Like, going running is good for you, being offline is good for you, going to bed on time is good for you,
structure,
being in loving connection with other people is good for you, structure is good for you.
That's the formula.
And so, to finish, because I do have to go, I've got to go to, it's not, and it's different for everyone. It doesn't have to be sport necessarily, but some sort of creative expression, poetry, dance, whatever, But, I think talking about that stuff helps other people. A lot of people are in dark places, but they're not taking actions. And yes, we have to be mindful that our trauma is not our fault, but it's only us who's going to help us, man. Like, it's our responsibility to do it. No one can do the work for us, man. You're in recovery, like, no one ever made you go to a meeting. You went to a meeting. No one ever made you quit selling drugs. You quit selling drugs. You didn't do these things because of external factors. You did it because you had an internal drive, right? And we need to acknowledge the environments that we come from and the histories we live, and all the fucked up stuff that might have happened to us, right? But like, ultimately, if we want our lives to be better, we have to make it better. It
is lifestyle, isn't it? If you want a good life, you have to have a good lifestyle, and that's recovery is a lifestyle. Staying mentally well is a lifestyle, and equally, lifestyles what will make you mentally unwell. Lifestyles will make you addicted. Association, what you do, and all that stuff. Thank you so much, Richie, for coming on the show. It's been a really cool interview. I've barely even looked at my notes because we've just been into it. Where you do so much stuff.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah, I got a website, richiehardcore.com, and I'm on Instagram at richiehardcore. I got a public Facebook page at richiehardcore. There's the best place to check me out, man. Thank you.
Awesome, Richie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Listen to the show and hit subscribe to free yourself from the shackles of the mind. And if you find some benefit, please share it with a friend, and let's make the world a better place together.